Good evening, YouTube. Good evening, YouTube. It's your guy J Crew to you, coming to you once again with another video on this evening here on September 26, 2021. I know I told you I was gonna be doing more videos of a certain variety, mainly sports videos, you know, this this fall. But I know I kind of falling behind on that. It had some things come up in real life here that I had to tend to. So that comes first before anything. But I'm gonna try to get back on this. I got some free time here this evening. As you can see, or you can probably tell, I got part of the University of Georgia Bulldogs football schedule pulled up here on the computer screen. And it's basically illustrating what they've been doing on the past three games in terms of their whether they've been winning or losing. As y'all know, I follow Georgia football. I stated like in earlier videos this year, and the last video I did when UGA was on, when they just gave the Clemson Tigers, that epic beatdown in the first game of this year. But of course, they've been playing since then. In the past 3 weeks, they have not had a week off yet in this season. As you can see, September 11th, they played the University of Alabama Birmingham, known as UAB. Last week, they played the South Carolina Gamecocks. And just yesterday, they played the Vanderbilt Commodores. And as you can see in all three of these performances, Georgia handled each team pretty thoroughly, and for the most part. There may have been one or two players for the opposite team who may have been making plays here and there, but for the most part, Georgia did its job. And if you've been watching UGA for this entire year, you know their defense is pretty much one of the top ranked defenses, if not the top ranked defense in the country. Those guys are beasts. They're not allowing the team to do too much of anything, whether it's running or passing the ball. And as I said before, I did a video which I've already covered the Clemson game, but I'm gonna go back to University of Alabama Birmingham game a couple of weeks ago. As you can see, UGA won that game 56-7. It was at Athens. It was at Stanford Stadium up there in Athens, Georgia. And in that particular game, of course, the University of Alabama Birmingham, for anybody that's followed that program, they were shut down maybe for like a year or two within the last 4 or 5 years. I can't remember the exact circumstances of why they shut down because I don't really follow their program like that. But I know they were shut down, and I want to say that was mentioned during the game. But either way, they eventually got back on their feet, hired a fresh coaching staff, and put football back into their university's schedule of to do things. In terms of what the school needs to do to get back on its feet fully. Unfortunately, they ran to the Georgia Bulldogs a few weeks ago. And for anybody that remembered that game, who followed that game, the starting quarterback JT Daniel was hurt. He had some kind of somewhat of a weird injury. I think it was an upper body injury. Maybe he had. I can't remember the exact injury, but JT Daniels really didn't play. And so, if anybody was following that game, you were thinking that UGA was going to end up starting a gentleman by the name of Carson Beck, who was a all-state player out of Florida 2 or 3 years ago. Who's more in the tradition of a drop back quarterback. And so that's what Kirby Smart had been alerting everyone maybe to up throughout that whole week was that, they were probably going to be looking to start Carson Beck. That was at least a scuttlebutt that had been whispered about within UGA's practices. Lo and behold, when the game starts, who do we see? Their 5'10" that's listed as a 5'11" quarterback, Stetson Bennett. UGA fans were both maybe, although they didn't respect the move, they were a little bit excited for Stetson Bennett because for anybody who watched Georgia football last year, he started 3 or 4 games before JT Daniels got out there and took over the position firmly. Some people were somewhat disgusted because they're like, why are we still sticking with Stetson Bennett? Like, he's not like a top tier quarterback, nor does he have the potential. Maybe somewhere deep down in Kirby Smart's soul, maybe he wants to show the man a little bit of respect. He wants to give Stetson Bennett some kind of credit for sticking it through, throughout his career, the UGA program showing dedication. Maybe he wants to do that and show some kind of appreciation for him. Say, you know what? Let's give this dude a chance. Even though Carson Beck might be the more physically gifted player, let's give Stetson Bennett a chance. Let me go ahead and admit I didn't care to see Stetson Bennett out there. I think he's like one of those guys who's good to sort of mimic another team quarterback in the practice. I think he's purely like a practice player who probably doesn't need to play in any football games. I just don't think he has enough physical tools. And he's a little bit on the smaller side. And so I was expecting Carson Beck to start. But either way, he came out there and he actually had a pretty good game. Given his UAB, he threw for over 200 yards, had 3 or 4 touchdowns, I believe, passing. And Stetson Bennett did pretty good. But again, this is against the University of Alabama, Birmingham. So you have to sort of put that performance in context. You know, it's not like he's playing Florida. It's not like he's playing Alabama. But, you know, so of course he's probably going to look good. I remember in that game, he threw a long touchdown to Jermaine Burton. He was like either the first or second player of their first offensive series they had. So he kind of opened things up early. He also threw a long touchdown pass to that freshman sensation tight end, Brock Bowers, who I'm going to talk about probably later on in this video. He threw a touchdown, a long touchdown to him, I believe it was in that game. That was like 70 or 80-something yards. And they just pretty much ran roughshod, as you can see by the score, 56-7 in that game. And so one thing that was kind of surprising is that UJ really didn't run the ball that well. You would think they would have had their way against the University of Alabama, Birmingham, but I think they came ready to stop Georgia's run, but maybe they didn't think Georgia was going to have too much going on from a passing standpoint because of what they saw with Clemson. And what I guess Kirby Smart's reputation had been was basically to be to produce the lack of a passing game, but be prolific in running the football. But they didn't really see that. It was the inverse. They saw a good passing game with the okay running game. Moving on to last week, South Carolina. For anybody who's been following South Carolina this year, you know there's no getting around it. They're pretty much a team that is rebuilding, have a new head coach, you know, a bunch of, you know, new players. They're in transition. Matter of fact, the coach, Will Muschamp, was there, I believe, in the past 3 to 4 years, but he's back on Georgia, the University of Georgia staff as some kind of, coach or coordinator. And so they're just a program in transition, and just because of that, UJ was expected to run a rough shot over South Carolina. South Carolina wasn't expected to do jack crap like in that game. And when you look at the score, you're like, wow, Georgia, they did beat them, but you would even expect, a lot more than that, given that South Carolina was in the shape they're in. So that was kind of surprising. It was kind of surprising that it wasn't even worse than that. As a matter of fact, if for people who watched that game, we were kind of both laughing, but surprisingly frustrated at one aspect of that game. The quarterbacking situation for the other team. For people who follow Georgia in some of their games against Alabama, and one of those games that end up in frustration, there was a weird scenario that tended to happen in some of these past games in Alabama over the past 3 or 4 years. Georgia would maybe knock out the starting quarterback, and they would end up having to play the backup quarterback a few times, and the backup quarterback would sort of lead them to a victory. The most painful one being like 4 or 5 years ago when UGA was playing in the national championship game, and they had knocked out, or should I say, they had held Jalen Hurts in check so much. He was taken out in the second half in favor of Tua Tagovailoa. And Tua Tagovailoa, although he did make some mistakes, he basically led them to a win. And so again, it was another frustrating experience that was really becoming familiar for folks at UGA. And again, I want to say maybe the next year or either the year after that, when they were playing like in the conference championship, Tua Tagovailoa, I want to say, had been knocked out of the game. And Jalen Hurts had to come in maybe in the fourth quarter or something like that. He had to save the day. I may have the quarterbacks wrong in terms of who actually was starting first. I don't know if it was Tua or another quarterback. I won't say it was Tua. But he came in and got hurt. Jalen Hurts had to come in and save the day again. And so the bottom line is they won. And it was just very, very, very frustrating. And so, it was a scenario that, strangely enough, kind of played itself into reality again. This year. And last week on September 18th, which was kind of weird. For people who follow South Carolina, they were in such desperation. They had been starting this dude who was a graduate assistant for the past few games by the name of Zeb Noland. And like I said, he wasn't, to my knowledge, he wasn't some big-time player in high school. He literally was a graduate assistant that had been starting. In this game, early on, Georgia knocked him out of the game. I forget what quarter it was, but they knocked him out of the game. And as a result, they brought in another guy that nobody's ever heard of, Luke Doty. Last name Doty. Luke Doty actually made some nice pass plays to a gentleman by the name of Josh Vann, who was a good-looking receiver for South Carolina. Josh Vann had over 100 yards. He had a couple of TDs, I believe, in that game. And even though it really didn't, it wasn't a major factor, they still were able to make big plays in that game. And this was a South Carolina team that's rebuilding, so they shouldn't have been able to do that under normal circumstances. But again, UGA, was in a scenario that had become familiar with them that most teams really don't want to be in. You would want to play the guy that you studied the film of, not some no-name backup that you have to sort of guess at what he's doing. Either way, they won the game 40-13, but Josh Vann had a really good game along with Luke Doty. Okay, moving on to yesterday's game at Vanderbilt. It was a woodshed beating. UGA beat them 68-0. Vanderbilt couldn't do anything. They couldn't run, they couldn't throw, they couldn't pass. Throwing and passing the same thing. I'm sorry about that. But either way, given that JT Daniels had actually come back for the South Carolina game, and he started at Vanderbilt again yesterday, you would just expect them to come in there and just spank people. And they just had shown us what they have been showing us so far this season, that the passing game is ahead of the running game. And in both the UAB game and South Carolina game, the main guy who would emerge as he would in the Vanderbilt game was Mr. Brock Bowers. This guy has been a freshman sensation. If he stays healthy, Brock Bowers is going to be a first-team All-American. Most people might just say, oh, only a freshman All-American. He should be an All-American no matter what classification. That dude has been that good. Brock Bowers has been that much of a killer for other teams. He's been unbelievable. As you can see, probably at least to some extent, to the right of the screen there, you see the UGA player by the name of Zamir White. He's a team leader in rushing. Zamir leads his team in rushing with 206 yards as of right now, if my statistics stand correct. He leads the team in rushing with 206 yards. Brock Bowers, as a freshman tight end for Napa, California, is leading his team in both receptions and yardage. As I mentioned earlier in this video, a lot of people were frustrated with what they've seen with the lack of a passing game over the past 4 to 5 years since Kirby Smart has been here at UGA. This year is not one of those years because the passing game is working better than the running game. We're used to seeing running backs just kind of get the majority of the handles, and maybe there'll be passing plays every once in a while. We've had some great talent, as I've mentioned probably in other videos here and there. We've had Todd Gurley. We've had Nick Chubb. We had Sony Michel, DeAndre Swift. And Zamir White, he was supposed to be like a guy who was along those lines. He's just been solid. He hasn't really been spectacular. He's had a few long running plays, but not nothing that's overly spectacular on a consistent basis. That's what's been missing from UGA's run game. It's been no spectacular long run plays like every game. You ever seen like a lot of 100-yard games out of him? He kind of like is a guy who runs between the tackles, who's more of a hard runner, who has good but not great speed. That's really what we've seen out of Zamir White. But since Brock Bowers has come on the scene this year, it's been weird to watch UGA's offense. Keep in mind, Brock Bowers, I think maybe was a number one tight end recruit nationally. If he wasn't the number one guy, he probably was at least in most people's top 5 list. And we've been able to see why. He's been unreal as a pass catching threat. And what's weird, Brock Bowers has seemingly been what has made this offense come together is his presence. I mean, us as UGA fans, we've been very, very frustrated at what we've seen, like I said, over the past 4 or 5 years from Kirby Smart. This ain't one of them years. I mean, Brock Bowers is just eating yards up. He's scoring multiple touchdowns a game. He has been what they've been looking for. And let me mention this. For people who follow UGA football, who follow some of my videos already I've done on UGA, they already have 2 tight ends that people should know about. One is Darnell Washington. He was either the number 1 or number 2 tight end recruit of the 2020 class, depending upon which website or web service, recruiting service, I should say, ranked him. The other guy who's with UGA but not with UGA right now, Reed Gilbert, he was the same way. And I've already done a video on Reed Gilbert. He was the number 1 or number 2 guy according to which recruiting service you follow for the 2020 class. Reed Gilbert actually had a nice freshman year at LSU. He had about 35 catches, I believe. And Darnell Washington, he really only had like 8, 9 catches last year for UGA. Darnell was trying to find his way, and I've already talked about this in another video, but I think he was a little bit out of shape, and he was kind of learning what he needed to do. But unfortunately for UGA, but not so unfortunately this year, Darnell has really been hurt. He's had a foot injury for the first 4 or 5 weeks. I don't know when he's going to be back. And if people either people know about, they don't know about, Reed Gilbert, he's not even with UGA right now. He's not practicing with the team. He's dealing with Kirby Smart is deemed a personal issue. So Brock Bowers' emergence has been amazing. But remember this. This is what top programs do. If one guy or 2 guys can't come out there and play for whatever reason, top programs go out there and they reload. And that's what UGA has done. They reloaded. For yesterday's game against Vanderbilt, we've seen another red shirt freshman receiver, a guy that we didn't even think about, Ladd McConkey, some guy from North Georgia. I think I remember his name, but I really didn't follow him because I didn't expect him to be that much of a threat. I think he scored 1 or 2 touchdowns yesterday. Ladd McConkey, 5'11", maybe 180, something like that. Because keep in mind, they've had some receivers who have been kind of banged up this year, and that we haven't had a chance to really, see what they can do. Jermaine Burton was hurt in different parts of preseason camp. Jermaine Burton is just probably coming back healthy. Well, he's healthy now as he had that long pass play against UAB. But he really isn't getting like a lot of catches. Because when I saw Jermaine Burton last year, especially that Mississippi State game with JT Daniels threw for 400 yards, I'm thinking to myself, he's going to be the leading receiver. That guy's going to lead this team receiver. He's ridiculous. He's fast. He's about 6 foot, about 190, good speed. He's going to lead this team receiver. We haven't really seen too much of Jermaine Burton this year. He's made a couple of nice pass catching plays, but he hasn't been memorable. George Pickens, as everybody know, he blew his knee out in the spring. And so George Pickens, is not even available. So, but they're talking about George Pickens maybe being able to come back, within at some point before the year's out. Me personally, I don't know why. If I was in George Pickens' shoes, I'd be like, let me just, get my red shirt in and I'll come back next year. Let me get my red shirt in. I don't even know why they're talking about him coming back this year. I don't understand that. He has a lot of guys that are really stepping up. Brock Bowers, even though he's a tight end, there's a lot of dudes that's really stepping up and playing some real good football. So I really haven't seen the point in that. I really just haven't seen the point. If I were him, I would just stay out. And I mean, I just don't know what he's thinking about, coming back. Another guy, Dominic Blaylock, he got hurt. I want to say he got hurt at the end of the 2019-2021 season. He got hurt or something like that. I want to say that's when he got hurt. So Dominic Blaylock, he got to blew his knee out, so he really didn't play last year. And again, I might be wrong on this, but I think it was something like that. So he's been out. He ain't really been playing. So they just been snake bit in a lot of different, with a lot of different receivers just been kind of out. And, it's been unfortunate. But again, what I'm saying is good football teams figure out a way to get around stuff like that. That's what they do. They got another gentleman who's been kind of hurt. He's had somewhat of a knee injury. I think he had a minor knee surgery, Kearis Jackson. I thought Kearis Jackson was going to be a guy who exploded this year. But he's been kind of hindered by somewhat of a knee injury in camp, in preseason camp. He hasn't been able to do too much. So we've had to see a lot of young guys step up like that. A.D. Mitchell, number 5. That kid out of Tennessee, he's starting to come on a little bit. He's made some nice catches out there. He don't like a speed player, but he's about 6'3", maybe like 190, 200. Like he runs good routes, has good hands. I think he had a drop last week, but I think that he really made a lot of noise during the preseason. So the Bulldogs have a lot of talent in which they're just utilizing by reloading. And again, Brock Bowers has been, the shining star as far as I'm concerned in this offense so far this year. He's scoring multiple touchdowns a game. He's making a lot of good pass plays. And he's going to make it hard for Reed Gilbert and Darnell Washington, to me, to be the featured tight ends on this field as far as I'm concerned. They probably going to turn Darnell Washington more or less as a blocking tight end and barely throw that dude the football, as good as Brock Bowers has been. So, again, the Bulldogs are 4-0 right now. They're the number 2 team in the country. Alabama still reigns as number 1. And it looks like that's what it's going to be in the SEC. Let me say this. Georgia does have some interesting games coming up based upon how some of their competition has been doing. Next week, I believe they face Arkansas. Arkansas is undefeated this year, surprisingly. And keep in mind, a former UGA line coach, Sam Pittman, is coaching Arkansas. They're 4-0 this year. So they've been a really great story. They got a good quarterback in KJ Jefferson. So that's going to be an interesting game. And whenever they play Florida, that is going to be even a more interesting game, because most people didn't expect too much out of Florida this year because they were trying to break in a new quarterback. But their quarterback down there, I can't remember the kid's name, he's done better than expected. And so that's going to be an interesting game. So it's not going to be as much of a cakewalk as we thought. Again, we're going to see how the rest of this thing shakes out, but it looks like it's going to be UJ versus Alabama again in the conference championship, and that's probably going to determine who plays in the national championship, from what I'm seeing. So what you got, J. Crew to you, giving you the update here, finally getting you a football video that I've been promising for weeks. We'll try to get back on it here, and just letting y'all know, Georgia Bulldogs, keep on the lookout on the national championship run this year. J. Crew to you, I'm out.